You can't outrun your past. The words haunted me as I walked through the bustling streets of Manhattan, the city's lights reflecting off the rain-soaked pavement. I didn't want to believe it, but deep down, I knew it was true. My name is Lily Johnson, and I've spent my entire life fighting to keep my past buried. But some things are too big to escape. As I turned the corner, my heart skipped a beat. There he was, Dominic Castellano, the man I never wanted to meet, yet somehow, I always knew I would. He stood at the entrance of the gala, his dark eyes scanning the crowd with an unsettling calm. He was dressed in a sharp black suit that seemed tailored for a man who didn't care about anything but control. The faint glint of silver from his cufflinks caught the light, but it was his presence that drew my attention. I couldn't help but feel like I was standing in front of a storm that was about to hit. A chill ran down my spine, and for a moment, I couldn't move. He didn't look at me immediately, but when his gaze finally met mine, it was as if the world paused. His eyes were sharp, calculating, and for some reason, I felt like he could see right through me. I'd never seen a man like him. He wasn't just wealthy. He radiated power, a kind of authority that made everyone around him take a step back. I had no idea who he was, but I knew one thing for sure. I wasn't ready for whatever was coming. You're Emily, right? The voice was low, controlled, but there was an unmistakable tension in it. I nodded before I could stop myself. How did he know my name? The question burned in my mind, but before I could ask, he spoke again. I need you to follow me, he said, his tone leaving no room for refusal. My heart raced as I felt the weight of his words. This wasn't a request. It was an order. I took a hesitant step forward, unsure of what I was walking into. Dominic led me through the crowd, and as we moved, I couldn't shake the feeling that everything I knew about my life was about to be turned upside down. There was something about the way he walked, the way people instinctively parted for him, that made me feel small and insignificant. I had worked hard to make my life my own, to rise above the expectations of others. But this man, he was different. As we approached a secluded area of the ballroom, I felt a knot tighten in my stomach. This wasn't just some wealthy businessman. This was someone who had the world at his feet. And for some reason, he had chosen me. I know who you are, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. And I think you know who I am. I had no idea what he meant, but the way he said it sent a jolt of fear through me. What was he going to do? What did he want from me? Before I could respond, he stepped closer, and the distance between us felt charged with something I couldn't define. You're mine now, he declared, his voice firm, leaving no room for argument. The words hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. I couldn't speak, couldn't move. And just like that, I realized I had walked into a world I didn't understand, a world where my freedom was no longer my own. I wanted to run, but I knew it was too late. The sound of the ballroom faded as I stepped into the quiet corridor, the air thick with tension. Dominic led me, his steps deliberate, his presence commanding. Every inch of me screamed to escape, but my legs refused to move. I had entered this world without knowing the rules, and now, there was no turning back. The silence between us was heavy, yet I could feel his gaze on me, like a weight pressing down on my chest. We reached the end of the hall, and he stopped. Turning to face me, his eyes never left mine. You don't belong in this world, Emily, he said, his voice low but firm. But I'm going to make sure you learn what it means to be a part of it. His words were a challenge, and though I wanted to retort, I couldn't find my voice. The power in his tone had rendered me speechless. What did he mean by that? Why had he chosen me? Was this some kind of game? My thoughts raced as he stepped closer. My pulse quickened, and I took a step back instinctively, only to be stopped by the wall behind me. There was nowhere to go. Don't be afraid, Dominic said, his tone softer now, but still commanding. I'm not going to hurt you, but you will learn what it means to trust me. I wanted to argue, wanted to shout at him for dragging me into this strange, dangerous world. But the words wouldn't come. He was right, in a way. I didn't belong here, and the more I tried to deny it, the more I realized how powerless I was against him. The world he inhabited was one of power, secrets, and shadows. And for some reason, I was now a part of it. I don't want to be here, I finally whispered, my voice shaky. I didn't ask for this. Dominic didn't respond immediately. Instead, he studied me for a long moment, as if weighing my words, as if trying to understand the real me beneath the surface. Then, with a slow, deliberate movement, he reached out and touched my arm. It wasn't forceful, but there was something possessive about the way his fingers curled around my skin. You don't have a choice, he said quietly. You're mine now, whether you like it or not. The words sent a shiver down my spine, and for a brief moment, I wished I could just disappear. But I couldn't. I was trapped in this world, with him. I wanted to scream, to push him away, but something in his eyes made me pause. There was an intensity there that I couldn't explain, something raw and powerful that both terrified and intrigued me. I swallowed hard, trying to regain my composure. What do you want from me? I asked, my voice stronger now. Dominic's lips curled into a faint, knowing smile. I already told you. You'll learn what it means to trust me. And in return, you'll understand what it means to be part of this world. He stepped back, giving me space, but the air still felt charged with his presence. I didn't know what to do. The world I had known, the life I had built for myself, suddenly seemed so distant, so out of reach. It felt like I was on the edge of something I didn't understand, something I had no control over. But as much as I wanted to fight it, I knew that Dominic had a hold on me. And there was no escaping him. You'll see, he said, his voice low, but filled with a quiet certainty. You'll see exactly what I mean. I wanted to ask more, to demand answers, but before I could speak, he turned and walked away, his footsteps echoing in the empty corridor. I stood there for a moment, alone with my thoughts, feeling the weight of what had just happened. What did he want from me? Why did he choose me? As I stood there, the weight of his words settling in my mind, I realized something. This wasn't just about trust. This was about power. His power. And I was about to learn exactly what it meant to be caught in his world. The next few days passed in a haze, each moment a blur as I tried to navigate the world Dominic had thrust me into. I had always prided myself on my independence, on my ability to stand on my own 2 feet, but now, in his presence, it felt as if the ground beneath me was shifting, and I had no control over it. The mansion where I now stayed was nothing like the small, cramped apartment I had left behind. Every room was filled with expensive furniture and decorations, each one more luxurious than the last. I had always dreamed of living in a place like this, but now that I was here, I felt like a stranger in someone else's life. The first time I saw Dominic again after that night in the corridor, he was sitting in the grand study, papers scattered in front of him. He looked up as I entered, his expression unreadable. Sit, he said, his voice calm but firm. I hesitated for a moment before taking the seat opposite him, the tension in the air thick enough to cut with a knife. I've given you a place here, Emily, he continued, his eyes never leaving mine. You're not just here for my convenience. You're here because I believe you have potential. You just don't see it yet. I opened my mouth to protest, to tell him I didn't belong here, but he held up a hand to stop me. I'm not asking you to trust me yet, but I am asking you to listen. I nodded, though I wasn't sure what he meant. What do you want from me? I asked, my voice quieter than I intended. Dominic leaned back in his chair, his fingers steepled in front of him. I want you to learn, he said simply. Learn what it means to trust me, to understand what I do and why I do it. You've seen the power I wield, and you will see it more. I need you to understand why it's necessary. I didn't know what he meant by that, but I couldn't deny the fact that something in his words held weight. He wasn't asking for my loyalty, not yet, but it was clear he expected something from me. I wasn't sure what that something was, but I was beginning to realize that the more I resisted, the more I would be drawn into his world. Days turned into weeks, and slowly, I started to adapt to the rhythms of the mansion and the life Dominic led. I didn't understand everything, far from it, but I began to see the careful balance he maintained between power and control. He wasn't just a mafia boss. He was someone who had built an empire from nothing, someone who knew how to get what he wanted and keep it. It was hard not to be impressed, even though I still hated the way he held everything over me. One evening, as I walked through the hallway, I overheard a conversation between Dominic and one of his associates. She's not like the others, the man said. She doesn't fall in line as easily. I froze, not wanting to be noticed. Dominic's reply was low, but I caught every word. She doesn't need to fall in line. She needs to learn how to lead. The words echoed in my mind as I continued on my way. What did he mean by that? And why was he so determined to make me a part of this world? I hadn't asked for any of this. But the longer I stayed, the more I realized that leaving wasn't an option. Not anymore. One afternoon, as I sat at the large dining table, Dominic approached me with a folder in hand. I need you to go through this, he said, placing the papers in front of me. It's time for you to learn about the business. I stared at the documents, unsure of what I was supposed to do with them. You've been in the shadows long enough, he continued. Now it's time to step into the light. You'll understand soon enough why this is important. As I sifted through the papers, I couldn't help but feel a sense of dread creeping over me. This wasn't just some business deal. It was something far more complex, something that could change everything. But even as the fear settled in, I couldn't help but feel a strange pull, a desire to know more, to understand why Dominic trusted me with this. You're not ready, he said, his voice cutting through my thoughts. But you will be. Just trust me. His words felt like a promise, but one that I wasn't sure I could keep. Trust him? I had no idea how. But something about him, about the way he looked at me, made me think that maybe, just maybe, I could start to believe him. The days passed, each one drawing me deeper into his world. The mansion, once foreign and cold, was starting to feel more like home. But I couldn't ignore the nagging feeling in the pit of my stomach. What would happen when I finally understood everything? What would happen when I truly saw the cost of trusting Dominic Castellano? The morning sun filtered through the grand windows, casting long shadows across the marble floors. It was a different day, but the tension in the air felt the same. Dominic had been increasingly distant lately, focused on business matters that I couldn't quite understand. The files he had given me remained on the table, untouched, their contents still a mystery I was afraid to uncover. But there was something else, a nagging feeling that I couldn't shake. I was starting to become too comfortable in this world, too accepting of the power and control that Dominic wielded. And that terrified me. I wasn't here because I wanted to be. I was here because I had no other choice. I knew that. But the more I saw of Dominic, the more I understood just how deeply his world ran. One evening, as I sat in the library, my eyes scanning a book I had no real interest in, Dominic entered the room. His presence filled the space, just like it always did. There was something about him, a force of nature that demanded attention. Emily, he said, his voice breaking the silence. I need to talk to you. I looked up from the book, meeting his gaze. What about? I asked, my voice steady, but I could feel my pulse quicken. Sit with me, he commanded, taking a seat on the plush sofa across from me. He didn't wait for me to respond, his eyes never leaving mine. Reluctantly, I set the book aside and sat down. The air between us was charged, and for the first time in a long time, I felt vulnerable. He leaned back, his gaze thoughtful as he watched me. I've been watching you, he began, his tone low, but not unkind. You've been holding back. I know you don't trust me, but you're starting to trust this world. My heart skipped a beat. Was he right? Was I starting to trust him? I don't trust anyone, I replied, my voice softer than I intended. Not even me, he asked, a slight edge to his voice. I hesitated, my thoughts racing. I don't know, I whispered, the words escaping before I could stop them. He was quiet for a moment, studying me. Then, with a faint smile, he leaned forward. You're not like the others, he said. You think you can control everything, but you can't. Not here. Not with me. His words hit me like a wave, and I felt a sharp, inexplicable sting in my chest. He was right. I had always prided myself on being in control, on making my own decisions. But in this world, with Dominic, I was powerless. And that realization hurt more than I cared to admit. What do you want from me, Dominic? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. He stood up, walking toward the window as he looked out at the sprawling grounds below. I want you to understand, he said, his voice quieter now. I want you to understand why this world exists and why it has to be this way. I didn't understand. I didn't want to understand. But something about his tone, something about the way he spoke, made me want to listen. You think this is all about power, he continued, turning to face me. But it's not. It's about survival. It's about keeping the people you care about safe. Everything I do to protect what's mine. My mind raced as I processed his words. Was he trying to justify his actions? Or was he simply trying to explain his world? And what am I? I asked, the question slipping out before I could stop it. Dominic's gaze softened, but there was still an intensity there that unsettled me. You're part of my world now, he said simply. Whether you like it or not. I wasn't sure how to respond. I had been trying so hard to fight this, to fight him. But the more I resisted, the more I realized that I was already a part of it. A part of him. The thought made my stomach churn, but there was something else there too. a strange pull that I couldn't ignore. "You've been given a choice," he said, his voice calm but firm. "You can stay, learn, and become a part of this world. Or you can leave. But I can't guarantee you'll make it out alive." The weight of his words hung in the air, and for a moment, I couldn't speak. What did he mean by that? Was he threatening me? Or was this just another part of his world I didn't understand? He didn't give me a chance to ask more questions. "I'll give you time," he said, his gaze never leaving mine. "But don't take too long. The clock is ticking." With that, he turned and left the room, leaving me alone with my thoughts. I sat there for what felt like an eternity, trying to process everything he had said. I wasn't ready for this world. I wasn't ready to trust him. But as much as I hated to admit it, I knew that I was already in too deep. There was no turning back now. The days that followed felt like an endless cycle of anticipation and dread. Every step I took in Dominic's world seemed like I was walking on the edge of a cliff, unsure if I would fall or be caught. I had started to learn the rules, though I wasn't sure if I was ready to play the game. Every time I entered a room, I could feel eyes on me, like I was being watched by more than just the people in the mansion. Dominic had given me more responsibilities, tasks that pulled me deeper into the web of his empire. The more I worked, the more I realized how little I knew about this world and how much there was to learn. But no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was always one step behind. One evening, as I sat in the study, going over documents Dominic had handed me, the door creaked open, and there he was. Dominic. He stepped inside, his usual confidence radiating from him like a physical presence. He didn't speak immediately, just stood there, watching me with those sharp eyes that never seemed to miss anything. "Are you ready to talk yet?" he asked, his voice calm, but with a hint of something darker underneath. I looked up from the papers, meeting his gaze. I didn't know what he meant by talk, but I wasn't ready for another one of his cryptic conversations. "About what?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. Dominic walked over to the chair beside me and sat down, his posture casual, but I knew better than to think he was ever truly relaxed. "You're still holding back," he said, leaning forward slightly. "You've been here for weeks, and yet, you're still not ready to fully trust me." The words stung, more than I expected. I didn't want to trust him. I didn't want to be a part of this world. But the longer I stayed, the more I realized that trust wasn't something I could control. It was something that had to be earned, and Dominic had a way of doing just that. "I'm not sure what you want from me," I said, my voice quieter now. "I don't know how to trust you, Dominic." He studied me for a moment, his eyes intense, as if he was trying to see right through me. Then, without a word, he reached out and placed a hand on the table in front of me, his fingers brushing against mine. It wasn't a gesture of comfort or affection, but something else, something that made my heart race despite myself. "Trust is earned, Emily," he said softly. "But it's also a choice. And the sooner you make that choice, the sooner you'll understand what it means to be part of my world." His words hung in the air between us, heavy and charged. I wanted to pull my hand away, to break the contact, but I couldn't. It wasn't that his touch was commanding. It was the way he made me feel, like I was on the edge of something important, something that could change everything. "I'm not asking you to blindly follow me," he continued. "But I need you to understand that everything I do is for a reason, and I need you to stop fighting it." Fighting it? I hadn't realized I was fighting it, but now that he mentioned it, it felt like I had been. Everything about this world felt wrong to me, but at the same time, I couldn't deny the pull it had on me. "I don't know how to let go of the fear," I whispered. Dominic's gaze softened slightly, though the intensity never left. "Fear is natural," he said, "but you can't let it control you. You can't let it control us." There it was again, the us. The idea that I was no longer just me, that somehow, in some twisted way, I was connected to him. "I'm not asking you to change overnight," he added, his voice gentle but firm. "But I need you to be honest with yourself. What do you want, Emily? Do you want to keep fighting this, or do you want to be a part of it?" The question lingered in the air, and I knew the answer wasn't something I could give lightly. But deep down, I already knew. I wasn't ready to admit it, but I was starting to see how this world could pull me in. How Dominic could pull me in. I didn't want to be here, but I was already too far gone to turn back. "I don't know," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "I don't know what I want." Dominic nodded, as if he had expected that answer. He stood up, his gaze still on me. "You don't need to know yet," he said quietly. But when you do, I'll be here. With that, he turned and walked out of the room, leaving me alone with my thoughts. His words echoed in my mind, and I couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning. The beginning of something I couldn't stop, no matter how hard I tried. The beginning of a choice I wasn't ready to make. The days that followed Dominic's words were a blur of confusion and unease. I was still trying to process everything he had said, but no matter how hard I tried, the questions kept piling up. What did he really want from me? Why? Did he think I belonged in this world? Every time I looked at him, I felt like I was standing on the edge of a precipice, unsure if I should step forward or run in the opposite direction. The mansion had become my prison, but it also felt like the only place where I could make sense of the chaos inside me. One afternoon, as I sat in the study going over more documents, trying to make sense of the world Dominic had introduced me to, he appeared again, his presence filling the room without a word. I could feel the air shift as soon as he walked in, and my heart skipped a beat. I wasn't ready for this conversation, but I couldn't avoid it forever. "Emily," Dominic said, his voice steady but with a hint of something that made my pulse quicken. "It's time we talked about your future here." My throat went dry. My future? In this world? I had barely begun to understand the present, and now he was talking about my future? "What do you mean?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Dominic took a seat across from me, his eyes never leaving mine. "You've been here for weeks, and you've learned a lot. But now it's time for you to understand that this is more than just a place to hide. This is your reality now. You can either accept it or fight it, but it's your choice." I felt a knot tighten in my stomach. I had already been fighting it, hadn't I? But the more I resisted, the more I realized that my choices were becoming more limited. "I don't belong here," I said, almost as if I was trying to convince myself. Dominic's expression softened, but there was still a firmness in his gaze. "You do belong here, Emily. This world doesn't care who you are or where you came from. It only cares about what you're willing to do to survive." His words struck a chord with me. It wasn't the first time he had spoken about survival, but this time, it felt different. This wasn't just about power or control. This was about something deeper. "What are you asking me to do?" I asked, feeling a mixture of fear and curiosity. "I'm not asking you to do anything," he said quietly. "I'm asking you to choose. Choose if you want to be a part of this world or if you want to walk away. But walking away means leaving everything behind. Everything I've given you, everything you've built here. And that's a choice you have to make for yourself." I felt like the room was closing in on me. My mind raced as I processed his words. Dominic had given me a place in this world, a place that I never wanted, yet I had accepted. I had no idea what the consequences would be if I walked away, but I knew that staying would mean more of the same, more of him, more of this life I couldn't control. "I don't know what to choose," I whispered, almost afraid to say the words out loud. "Then don't choose," Dominic said softly. "Not yet, but know that the decision will come soon enough. And when it does, I'll be here." His gaze softened for a moment, but the weight of his words lingered in the air. I wasn't ready for this. I wasn't ready to face the reality of what I had gotten myself into. But deep down, I knew that I was already too far gone to walk away. The world he had shown me, this world of power and control, was a force I couldn't escape. And as much as I hated to admit it, a part of me didn't want to. As the days passed, I found myself drawn deeper into his world, whether I liked it or not. I couldn't ignore the pull anymore. But the more I gave in, the more I wondered what price I would have to pay for it. Would I lose myself in this world? Or would I become something I didn't recognize? The questions kept swirling in my mind, but there was no answer. Not yet. Dominic had shown me what this world was, but I wasn't sure if I was ready to accept it. Not yet. I had to make a choice, and that choice would define who I became. The weeks continued to slip by, each day blending into the next like a slow-moving river that I couldn't escape. I was still caught in Dominic's world, and every time I thought about leaving, something held me back. Maybe it was the promise of power, maybe it was the pull of his world, or maybe it was the undeniable connection that had started to form between us, even if I wasn't ready to admit it. I spent most of my time in the mansion, going through files and documents, learning the intricacies of the business that Dominic ran. But with each passing day, I felt myself growing more and more entangled in this life. The fear that I had been holding onto began to fade, replaced by a quiet acceptance that this was my reality now. It was strange, how quickly I had gone from resisting everything about this world to feeling like I was a part of it. One evening, as I walked through the grand hallway of the mansion, I came across Dominic in the sitting room, standing by the large window, looking out over the city. I didn't know why, but something about him in that moment felt different. There was a weight to his posture, something that made my chest tighten. I hesitated before entering, unsure if I should disturb him, but Dominic's voice broke the silence before I could turn away. "Emily," he said, his tone softer than I had heard it in weeks. "Come here." I stepped into the room slowly, my heart pounding in my chest. I didn't know what to expect, but I knew that this was different. The way he said my name made me feel like I was on the edge of something important, something that would change everything. I stood next to him, looking out at the city lights in the distance, but I could feel his presence beside me, so intense, so all-encompassing. "Do you ever think about what your life could have been like before this?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. I turned my head to look at him, surprised by the question. "What do you mean?" I asked, trying to understand what he was getting at. Dominic didn't immediately answer. Instead, he just stared out at the city, his eyes distant, like he was lost in thought. "Before you came here," he said, after a long pause. "Before all of this." I swallowed hard, unsure of how to respond. I had never thought about it, not really. My life had always been a struggle, always about survival, about getting by. I had never really stopped to think about what I could have been or who I could have been. I never had a choice, I said quietly, my voice breaking slightly. Dominic turned to look at me, his gaze softening. "You always have a choice," he said, his voice steady. "But sometimes, the choices we make shape us in ways we can't understand. And sometimes, we have to accept the paths we've been given." His words hung in the air, and for a moment, I didn't know how to respond. What did he mean by that? Was he trying to justify the life he had chosen for me? Or was he telling me that I had made my own choice when I decided to stay? "I never thought I'd end up here," I said, more to myself than to him. "I never thought I'd be a part of this world." Dominic looked at me, his eyes intense. "You are a part of it now," he said simply. "Whether you like it or not." I could feel the weight of his words, and I knew he was right. I was here, and I was part of this world, whether I wanted to be or not. But there was a part of me, deep down, that had begun to accept it. Maybe it was because of Dominic, or maybe it was because I had started to see the truth in his words. "What now?" I asked, unsure of what was expected of me. Dominic reached out, his fingers brushing against mine in a brief, almost unnoticeable touch. "Now," he said softly, "you learn to live with it. You learn to embrace it, to understand that this is who you are now. And you learn that you're not as powerless as you think." His words echoed in my mind as I stood there beside him. I didn't know what he meant by that, but I felt something stir inside me. Something I hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. Maybe this wasn't just a life I had to survive. Maybe, just maybe, it was a life I could learn to live. The question was I ready for that? Was I ready to fully accept the life Dominic was offering me? The world I had fought against, the world I had tried to avoid, was starting to feel like my only option. And somehow, it didn't feel like the end. It felt like the beginning. But I wasn't sure what that beginning would look like. Would I lose myself in this world, or would I find something I didn't know I was looking for? I didn't know. But for the first time since I had arrived here, I wasn't afraid of the answer. The days seemed to stretch on indefinitely, each one bringing me closer to something I wasn't sure I was ready for. I had accepted that I was part of Dominic's world, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I was standing on the edge of a precipice, with no idea how far the fall might be. The more time I spent here, the more I learned about the intricate balance he had created. There were things about his world that I still didn't understand, secrets I wasn't privy to, but I had come to realize that trusting him wasn't just about accepting his power. It was about learning to live in a world where that power controlled everything. And as much as I hated to admit it, I was starting to feel a part of it. One evening, as I walked through the corridor of the mansion, I found Dominic standing by the grand staircase, looking down at something in his hands. The moment I stepped into the room, he looked up, his eyes meeting mine with that same intensity that I had grown used to. "Emily," he said, his voice calm but firm, "I need you to understand something." I stopped in my tracks, unsure of what he meant. "What do you want me to understand?" I asked, my voice steady despite the flutter of uncertainty in my chest. Dominic walked toward me, his footsteps echoing in the empty space. I want you to understand the gravity of what you're part of, he said, his gaze never leaving mine. This isn't just about the business, the power, or the wealth. It's about something deeper, something that you'll never be able to escape once you truly see it. I felt a chill run through me at his words. There had been moments when I had thought about leaving, about walking away from everything. But something kept me here, something that I couldn't explain. I'm not sure what you mean, I said, my voice quiet. You're still not seeing it, Dominic said, his voice softer now. You think this world is just about control, about what you can gain from it. But it's not. It's about what you give up in order to survive in it. His words struck a chord with me, more than I expected. I had always been someone who valued independence, who believed that my choices defined me. But in Dominic's world, I was beginning to realize that those choices were becoming fewer and fewer. I don't want to lose myself in this, I said, the words escaping before I could stop them. Dominic's expression softened, but there was still a quiet intensity in his gaze. You won't lose yourself, Emily, he said, his voice gentle. But you will change. And the question is whether or not you're ready for that. I didn't know how to respond. I wasn't ready to change, not in the ways Dominic was suggesting. But a part of me knew that I already had, in ways I couldn't explain. I'm not sure if I can accept this, I admitted, my voice barely above a whisper. Dominic looked at me for a long moment, as if weighing my words. Acceptance is part of it, he said. But understanding is the key. You have to understand the cost of being a part of this world. Only then can you decide if it's worth it. I didn't know what the cost was, not fully, but I was starting to see the price, even if I didn't want to admit it. I had already given up parts of myself to be here, and there was no going back. Dominic's world was one of power, and in it, everyone had their role to play. My role was becoming clearer, but that didn't mean I had to like it. What do you expect from me? I asked, my voice shaking slightly. Dominic took a step closer, his presence overwhelming in a way that made my breath catch in my throat. I expect you to choose, Emily, he said quietly. Choose if you want to stay and understand this world, or choose if you want to walk away. But know that walking away might not be an option when the time comes. His words echoed in my mind long after he left, and I found myself standing there, frozen, trying to make sense of everything he had just said. I wasn't ready to make a choice, but I knew that the time was coming when I would have to. And when that time came, I wasn't sure what I would choose. Would I stay in this world, learning to live with the power and control that came with it? Or would I walk away, leaving everything behind? The question loomed over me, and no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't escape it. The choice was mine, but the consequences were out of my control. The days felt heavier, each one slipping by faster than the last, and with it, the weight of the choice I had yet to make pressed harder against me. Dominic's words, his promise that I would have to choose, lingered like an echo in my mind. I knew that eventually, I would have to face the truth, that I was no longer just an outsider to his world, but someone whose future was now intertwined with it. The more I tried to fight it, the more I realized that resisting was futile. This world, Dominic's world, had a grip on me, and whether I wanted it or not, I had been drawn into it. One evening, I found myself sitting by the window, staring out at the city lights below. The view from the mansion was beautiful, but it was a beauty I couldn't appreciate fully, not when my mind was consumed with so many questions about what the future held and what part one would play in it. I could feel the walls of the mansion closing in around me, and the weight of Dominic's expectations pressing down on me. It wasn't just the business or the power. It was everything. His world was everything, and I was starting to realize how little of myself was left. The life I had known, the life I had worked so hard to build, seemed so far away now. I had been forced to let go of so much of it just to survive in this new reality. But now, the question wasn't about survival. It was about what kind of person I wanted to be. I wasn't sure if I could handle the truth, but I knew it was time to face it. As I sat there, lost in my thoughts, I heard the soft click of the door opening behind me. Dominic's presence filled the room before he even spoke. Emily, he said, his voice calm, but with a quiet intensity that sent a shiver down my spine. I turned to face him, unsure of what to expect. His gaze locked onto mine, his expression unreadable. It's time to make your choice, he said. His words hung in the air, heavy with meaning. I had known this moment was coming, but now that it was here, I felt the weight of it more than I had imagined. I stood up slowly, unsure of what to say. The truth was, I wasn't ready to make this decision. But the longer I waited, the more I felt like I was running out of time. What if I don't choose? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Dominic studied me for a long moment, as if considering my question. You've already made your choice, he said quietly. Every day you stay here, every day you continue to learn, you're choosing this world. You're choosing me. The words stung more than I expected, and I felt a wave of frustration and confusion wash over me. I never wanted this, I said, the words escaping before I could stop them. Dominic's expression softened, but there was still an intensity in his gaze. No one ever does, he said, his voice low. But that's the thing about this world. It doesn't give you a choice. It takes what it needs, and in the end, you learn to either accept it or be destroyed by it. I didn't know how to respond to that. The truth was, I was terrified. Terrified of losing myself in this world. Terrified of becoming someone I didn't recognize. But there was something else there, something I couldn't deny. A part of me wanted to stay. A part of me wanted to embrace the power, the control that Dominic had. The longer I stayed, the more I understood what it meant to be a part of this world. But at what cost? What happens if I leave? I asked, the question heavy on my tongue. Dominic didn't answer immediately. Instead, he stepped closer, closing the distance between us. If you leave, he said, his voice quiet but filled with an undeniable weight, you'll never be able to escape the consequences. Not from me. Not from this world. His words sent a chill through me. I didn't know if he was threatening me or simply telling me the truth, but either way, I knew I had to make a decision. I'm not ready, I whispered, almost to myself. Dominic looked at me for a long moment, his eyes searching mine. You don't have to be ready, he said softly. You just have to choose. And once you do, there's no going back. The weight of his words settled over me, and for the first time, I realized that this wasn't just about power or control. It was about my future. The choice I made now would shape who I became. And no matter what I chose, I knew it would change everything. But was I ready to make that choice? Or would I continue to live in the limbo of uncertainty, never fully belonging to either world? The questions raced through my mind, but there was no answer. Not yet. The choice was mine to make, and I knew that the time had come. I had to decide whether I would continue to live in this world of power and control, or walk away and risk losing everything. And with that, I knew that whatever choice I made, it would define who I was forever.